high moods. Hey, it is Sam Murphy, and I am here with my friend and someone I respect and admire, Greg Klaumanzer, and we are continuing our conversation on mastering that inner game of business and state of mind and what that really means and the paradigm shifts within business. And one of the things that I really want to dive into today, because I want to know more, and I know that out there listening you do as well, is tell us more about this outside in versus inside out approach.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, great. So I think you were there when I was presenting, and I put a couple circles up on a board, you know, and I think that's a perfect metaphor. Like if you look at the world as being a circle, and you look at you in the center of that circle, for most people, it looks like the world has arrows pointing in towards us, and that we're impacted by the world of circumstances, really. And it really looks that way. Kind of what we talked about in the last video was the old paradigm, and the old paradigm, it really looked like the world was flat. Okay, and it's the same thing for human beings. It really looks like people, circumstances, and the situations of the world are the reasons why we feel the way we feel and really impact our outlook for life, okay? And so what we're presenting here in this discussion is a new paradigm in that the world right here, there's no arrows pointing in. You're not a victim of the world circumstances of people, but you, at the center, the arrows are going out. And you have the ability to, like quantum physics has now proven or shown us, that you have the ability to impact the world via your thinking and your feeling, and really by being connected to the fundamental principles that are underneath the human experience. So that's really kind of the big paradigm shift here, is that, and you and I talked about this, I think in the last video we poked to it, is that what these principles ultimately do is they give us our freedom back, you know, and how they do that is we start to understand how all human beings create their experience, not just us, but all human beings. And within that, what happens is, as we start to catch ourselves, because what's beautiful about the human system is it's built to self-correct, okay? And that's what's so beautiful is, you know, most of the personal development and personal growth is there's a lot of effort and a lot of practices, and, you know, I remember hearing some research. I don't know if you're familiar with a place called Esalen, but Esalen is up in Big Sur. It's kind of it's the mecca of human potential movement back in the 60s and 70s, and it's still there today. But what they were doing, they became a hub for teachers all over the world, teaching, you know, all kinds of esoteric teachings and real practical stuff, and self-awareness and all that. And they started to create a catalog of all the different practices and techniques to open up the human spirit, so to speak. Well, they stopped it about after 10,000 practices. They just stopped it because there were so many practices. So just imagine, I mean, you could do breath work, you could do vision boarding, you could do qigong, you could do energy work, you could do Reiki, you could do deep communication, you know, you could do eye gazing. I mean, the practices are endless. Okay.
Right.
And you could take that into, you know, the world of business. You say, well, the practices, you know, you got to be a master at time management. You got to be a master of leadership. You got to be a master of communication. So we can get really swept away and caught up in all of that. Okay. But what we're talking about here is so simple, you know, and what Einstein said was really famous for is reducing something to the most common denominator. He was all about simplicity, you know, and if we can find what's common within all human beings, that somehow that simplicity makes a real difference. Okay, so these principles that we're going to be sharing are really simple to get intellectually, like a 5-year-old could understand them. Okay, but the real juice in all of this is through realization and understanding and seeing something for yourself. So anybody listening here to this, I really want to encourage you to listen from an open place of, well, I've heard this, or, oh, this sounds like this, or whatever it is. If you can just kind of let all of that go, so to speak, and just kind of let it come in a different way. All right? So if it's okay with you, I want to talk about these principles a little bit.
Yes,
okay?
Please.
And why they're important. So regardless of who a human being is, or what their background is, or belief system, whatever it is, most people, Sam, will recognize the fact, okay, that there's an energy behind the human experience, okay, that without that, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be in this human experience. Now, what's interesting is most people take that for granted, and they don't give it much thought or attention or even acknowledge it. And the way I see it is that the cause of suffering and struggle, personally and professionally, okay, is really this lack of acknowledgement and lack of respect that we're part of a larger system. Okay, and because of that, and this is what I saw when I had my first insight into this. What I saw is I was actually humbled. I was going, oh my God, Greg, really? What I saw was how hell-bent I was, Sam, on being overly self-reliant. Like that personal growth saying, if it's to be, it's up to me. Okay?
Right.
And I was the poster child for that,
I think so many are, right? The get up and hustle, copy and then hustle, or, all that stuff that we see today. I'll do it my damn self,
Yeah. Get up and drink, get up and do the grind, so to speak, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's all about the grind, it's all about the hustle, Yeah. And the more you do that, there is short-term gain, there is value in the hustle and the grind, but it's not sustainable, at least from my point of view. Okay, nor is it really the path of much joy or peace or happiness, fulfillment. It's a lot of willpower. Okay, so what happens when I saw the fact, or started to acknowledge the fact, okay, that I'm part of a larger system. Not even going to say that I understand that, but just the sheer acknowledgement of it somehow connects me to it.
Right.
And it's like, the analogy I give people is that self-reliance is kind of like trying to solve problems with whatever's on your hard drive on your laptop or computer. Okay, you may find some solutions, but it's based on a known, because whatever's on your hard drive is known. It's limited. Okay. Now, what's really cool is if you have access to the cloud, the possibilities are endless. Okay. And so what I saw is that I'd been just spending too much time on trying to find solutions to my problems on my hard drive. Okay? And what became really exciting for me, and this is exciting for business owners, is when people start to realize that they have access to an intelligence, a wisdom, a common sense, and fresh thinking that's beyond what's on their hard drive, and that all that's really necessary is at the beginning, is just a simple acknowledgement of the fact that there's an energy behind the human experience. Now what's cool about this is the deeper I realize that, I realize the fact that not only am I connected to that, but as a coach, my clients have access to that too.
Right.
And that the way I see my job is not to share with them my wisdom, but to help them have access to Wi-Fi for themselves, so that they're flooded by their own insights and their own wisdom and their own understanding. Okay? Now, in the beginning in coaching, I thought I was responsible, that they were paying me the big bucks to impart my wisdom. Okay?
Right.
And I see it totally differently now, and the way I see it these days, Sam, is that my job is to help them, point them in the right direction, and give them the key to the Wi-Fi, and then the world is, they've got the world by the tail, so to speak, right?
Right.
And that's the real power in these understandings, in pointing people in the right direction, okay? Because the further you get away from that, the further I get away from the lack of acknowledgement or respect that there's an intelligence that I have access to, you have access to, everybody listening here has access to, and it's a genius beyond what we could come up in our intellectual mind, in our current thinking.
Right.
Okay? And that we all have access to that. That's the really cool thing. Now, for me, going beyond just business, and what's kind of really cool about this is that I start to relate to Sam a really different way, or clients a really different way. It's like I see her struggling with something, and I go, oh, well, she just doesn't have connection to Wi-Fi right now.
Right.
Right? And I don't get involved with your problems. I'm really here to support you to get connected back up to the intelligence. Okay?
Right.
And when you're able to do that, all of a sudden you're coming up with fresh ideas to your business. You have a better outlook, a higher state of mind in life. You feel actually held by life, part of a larger system. But when we're cut off from that, we feel alone. We feel, I'm here with my hard drive. It's like me, my self-reliance. If it's to be, it's up to me. That's a really lonely and cut off place to be.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just understand that one principle, that can be really, really helpful and really valuable. Okay. Now, the second principle is to acknowledge the fact that as human beings, we come out of the box. We're born with the gift of awareness. You could call it consciousness. And consciousness is our sensory system, of thought, of touch, smell, taste, all the five senses is what consciousness gives birth to, and awareness gives birth to. Okay, and so, gosh, when I start to acknowledge that more, I start to become more appreciative. There's a lot of talk about gratitude and creating gratitude lists and all this, but what happens is when the business owner or when a human being starts to recognize the fact that they're part of a larger system, that they've come out of the box with this gift of consciousness and awareness, and it's infinite, you start to become more grateful just as a natural byproduct of acknowledging that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
All right? And then the third principle is this, the principle of universal thought. Okay? And universal thought is kind of the missing link in terms of how human beings create their experience. Okay? Now, what happens is, if we understand the nature of universal thought, is every human being, from the time they wake up till the time they go to bed, and in many cases in their dream time, are living in a world of thought.
Right.
But much like fish in water, human beings don't realize they're living in a world of thought. And that's what creates all of their troubles. Okay? So when people start to wake up to the fact that they're thinkers, that they're thinking, and their thinking and their feelings are what are creating their experience in the moment, okay? When they even have the slightest glimpse into that, okay, they start to realize it's just their thoughts.
Right.
They're creating their experience. And it's not the experience, it's not the outside world itself, but it's their thinking about something that's creating a feeling or a mood, And then the world has to be consistent with that thinking and that feeling. Okay? And that's just how things work. Now, the deeper somebody understands the nature of universal thought, you become less fearful of thoughts. Okay? Like if everybody listening to this, Sam, left this call realizing that they didn't have to be afraid of their thoughts. They're just thoughts. That they don't have to be afraid of their feelings or their moods. They're just moods. Okay? And when you understand the nature of universal thought, what you understand is thought is transitory. It's like the clouds. It just keeps moving. It keeps moving. And so that's why we don't need to be afraid of it. If I have a fearful thought or a threatening thought or an insecure thought, I start to see that I have some control over how long that thought sticks around. Okay?
Right.
And that the more energy I give that thought, the longer it sticks around. And the less energy I give that thought, it passes. Because that's the nature of thought. Okay?
Right.
So when the thought passes, so does the mood. Okay? And so so what's in between that is space. It's the space between thoughts and the space between moods. And that's where fresh thinking and new possibilities for living and being and working start to arise. Okay? And so when somebody starts to understand the nature of thought, and they start to see that they're the ones getting involved in their thought, and the more that they're involved in that thought, it keeps them stuck and limited in terms of what they're able to do. Okay, like they're tying a rope around their own throat. Okay, and once they start to see that, there's a built-in design to the system for well-being and success. And in the earlier videos, I talked about this notion of self-correcting. Okay,
right.
And so what happens is just the realization and a simple understanding of how the system works, it's like the thoughts just start kind of going away. The thoughts start to pass more gently on their own. Okay? All right? So that's just kind of a real brief introduction to these fundamental principles behind the human experience. Okay? Now, you could say, well, what are the implications? Why is this important as a business owner, as a parent, or whatever? If you just understood this last piece about thought, okay, and you understood it for yourself, and you start to see it in other people, you go, oh, Sam's having some insecure thinking, which is why she's in the mood that she's in, okay? And so what happens is you realize that she's just having some thinking, and it'll pass, okay? And so will the mood, and I don't really need to get involved in it, okay? But the personal growth and development landscape at large wants to get involved in that, wants to process it, wants to go deep, wants to do child work, inner child work, and all that, okay? And I'm not saying that there's no value in it. It's just, it's unnecessary. It's not necessary. It really isn't, you know? And the deeper people have an understanding of this, it makes a real difference. You know, people have a greater sense of ease. They're more compassionate with themselves and others, you know? If you're a parent and your kid's acting up, you realize that they've got some thinking that's accompanied with that, okay? And you just start, you let that thinking go. Now here's the thing. When I realize the fact that if I get involved with my own thinking, it's going to stick around, I realize the fact that if I get involved with my child's thinking, or my employee's thinking, or my manager's thinking, that I'm actually keeping that around. Okay? And so what's really helpful in business, you know, is that we're grounded in this understanding, and we can just allow people to have their thoughts and their feelings and not be too concerned with them, understanding that they're going to pass. And the best thing I can do for another is stay grounded in what I know to be true, and I don't have to get involved with trying to solve their thinking or their feeling, because it's transitory.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So I feel like for myself and a lot of listeners out there is, yes, that sounds good. I want that. Right? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. So I can hear and understand these three principles. Mm-hmm. And one of my patterns, or even a downfall sometimes, is I'm really a doer. Right? So it's like, okay, I get it, but like, what else can I do to get it? Mm-hmm. You know? So mm-hmm. It is really understanding these principles, just sitting with it and understanding it, or how do you help people gain a deeper understanding or come to have a deeper understanding in, say, a quicker period of time, if they're open mm-hmm. and they want to grasp it, but it's just not landing.
Yeah, great. So that's the same question I had when I got introduced to this, because I'm an overachiever too. I'm like, okay, this sounds good. I've got it. Now, what can I do to supercharge this, you know?
Right. Give me my 10 steps.
And I was totally pissed off when I got the answer, okay? And it's like, there's nothing to do. There's no 7 steps. You just have to stay in the conversation and see for yourself and start to practice looking within for insights and understanding. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the next video is change and transformation via insights and understanding and realizations, because that's what causes change and transformation. It's not the how-to steps. That's the outside-in approach. And so what's really revealing, myself included, is that's what I was looking for. Outside in. Give me the steps. Okay? Right. And when I started to see that the falseness in that solution, because what these principles were ultimately teaching me is, Greg, trust yourself and look within. You've got the answers. You've got to go for insights, and it's not the 7 steps. It's any of this. You just have to look in a different direction than you're habitually looking in. Okay, so I will give you one to do. Okay, because it was helpful to me. Okay, and it's really, really simple. That just to understand that habitually that you're wired right now to look out into the world. Mm-hmm. To make things better, to rearrange things, to improve things, and that that when you wake up in the morning, that's your orientation to look outward. Okay, mm-hmm. So what you do is you just start looking in a different direction. So that's your doing this. You just start looking in a different direction. Okay, now the different direction is mind, universal mind, consciousness, and universal thought. Okay. Now, those are just pointers, okay? They're not. That's not the direction I'm asking you to look in, but I'm asking you to use those pointers and see where they point to, okay? And that's all you do. That's all you do. So, for anybody getting off of this call, or watching this video, is start to look within and just ask yourself, so what is universal mind pointing to? Okay, now I'll help a little bit here in that all of these principles are pointing to the same thing. Okay, and what they're pointing to is something formless, something invisible, something you can't see, but and we're wired as human beings to perceive. Okay, like when we were talking earlier, we talked about this energy behind life. Right? Mm-hmm. And like innately you're nodding and that makes sense. You go, yeah, okay, I got that. Okay, you got it intellectually. But now I'm asking you to go and explore that domain and see what you see when you start looking in that direction of a formless energy that is what fuels all of life, and just start noticing what happens for you when you look in that direction. Okay? Now, just for me talking about it and pointing in that direction, I feel a warmth in my heart. I start to feel an expansiveness. So sometimes you might see something, you might have an insight, but often what occurs is you may just end up with a feeling. Mm-hmm. And it's typically a good feeling. It's a feeling of being home. Okay? And And so that's the doingness here, okay, is that to give yourself time to look back in the world of the formless instead of habitually looking in the world of form. Okay, does that make sense?
Right,
okay.
Right. Instead of grasping what we all do so commonly outside. I need the thing, I'm going to do the thing, I'm going to fix the thing, I'm going to get to that thing. So, but instead of doing all that.
So, you know, one of my mentors in a group setting, he kind of did an experiment here. And he said, you know, you're looking in a direction right now. And he said, turn around and look in the other direction. So I'm going to just say, go ahead, turn around. Just go ahead and 180, turn around, look in the other direction. And then you're seeing something different than you just saw previously, right?
Right.
Okay. So you can turn back around. And that's really it. So you're just changing directions of where you're normally or habitually looking. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that's kind of the doingness around it. There's not much to do, but what we're after is insight, understanding, and realization, and that's where we're going to pick up in our next video.
All right. Well, I can't wait, and I'm sure everybody else out there is excited as well. So we will see you guys next time. Tune back in.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.